But following his arrest in August, Channel 5 decided to remove his shows from their schedules.
Welcome to WatchMojo UK, and today we're counting down our picks for the most nefarious presenters in British television history.
He will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Friday, the 2nd of May.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Jeremy Kyle. For years, Kyle was a staple of daytime television. He became infamous for creating an immensely hostile environment in which he'd humiliate vulnerable people experiencing hardships. Kyle acted like he was solving their problems, but it was all for the sake of entertainment. This modern-day form of human bear-baiting came to an end in 2019, when guest Steve Diamond was so broken by his appearance that he took his own life soon after. One contributing factor was that he failed a lie detector test, which was frequently used despite little to no evidence of their accuracy.
He felt that he hadn't humiliated or belittled Steve Diamond in this case.
Now, Kyle is widely perceived as a bully who cared little for his guests' well-being. Ben Thomas. If you're from Wales, you might be familiar with presenter Ben Thomas, who used to work on Wales Today and Fail. His career came to an end in 2019 when he was arrested for abusing both adults and children. Thomas was subsequently sentenced to 10 years in prison, perpetrating his first crimes in 1990 and his last in 2019. He even became a pastor at one point, a position he exploited to commit even more atrocious crimes. Thomas's crimes finally caught up with him at age 44, ruining his career as both a pastor and a presenter for good. Russell Brand. One of Essex's most famous actors has been in the news quite a lot during the 2020s, but not for anything positive. He rose to fame as a comedian, then a presenter of Big Brother's Big Mouth, and finally achieved international fame in the late 2000s. Currently, his career is almost entirely locked to YouTube, where he has a cult following who will defend him no matter what.
Detectives say they began investigating Brand in September 2023 after receiving a number of allegations.
As you're probably aware, he's been the target of a massive investigation, with multiple women claiming Brand abused them. Of course, he denies all this, using his Christianity as his primary defense. Dave Lee Travis. While he was primarily a DJ, Travis presented quite a few programs before Operation U-Tree in 2012. Top of the Pops is probably the most famous, but he was also recognised for hosting A Jolly Good Show for 20 years. In the wake of Jimmy Savile's death, a staggering amount of British public figures were accused of abominable crimes. One such individual was Travis, who was given a 3-month prison sentence in 2014 for indecent assault. This almost completely ended his career, although he briefly hosted a Saturday show on United DJs Radio, which closed in 2021. Peter Rael. Our next entry was predominant in the west of England, working as an announcer for HTV West, also known as ITV West Country. His earliest controversy was making indecent comments about Princess Diana just after her death. Rael's career took a turn for the worse in 2011, when he was arrested and subsequently charged with indecent assault. Most of his crimes took place in the 80s and 90s, most targeted younger women. This got Rael sentenced to 6 years in prison in 2012, which seems to be the last anyone's heard about him. Fred Talbot. Decades ago, Talbot used to be an adored figure on This Morning, where he did their weather on a floating map at Liverpool docks. The highlight was every time he jumped across from Great Britain to Ireland, so popular it usually had a crowd cheering him on. Now, no one's cheering for Talbot after he was sentenced to prison in the mid-2010s. He was charged with 10 counts of indecent sexual assault, getting him sent to the slammer until 2019. The majority of his crimes were committed while he was a teacher in the 1970s, a career which already ended in 1984 after making gross comments towards children. It makes you wonder if ITV ever did background checks back then. Stuart Hall. Hall was a prolific BBC News presenter about half a century ago, alongside presenting It's a Knockout. Like most presenters on this list, his career ended around 2012 because of allegations of abuse. These all took place between 1967 and 1991, which he was found guilty of in 2013, then subsequently imprisoned. Not for long though. He got out in 2015, just in time for Christmas. Hall gave an interview in 2016 about his experiences, the last time he was in the public eye. Apparently, BBC staff had been well aware of his vile desires, but like many disgraced icons of the time, he was too popular for them to do anything. Steve Kish, also known as Sizzlin' Steve. Kish is most well known for partly presenting CBBC's Officially Amazing. It ran from 2013, focusing on interesting and peculiar records from all over Earth. Initially, the show was primarily positive, being fun and educational for children. Unfortunately, the show was ruined when Kish was convicted of having heinous tastes in canines. He'd be spared prison by judges in 2021, but was still found guilty, sentenced to community service with his reputation ruined. Now he seems to have entirely given up presenting, with him unlikely to ever return to the profession. Rolf Harris.
But it seems no matter how long the inspectors do the job, they're always coming across something new.
Now one of the most hated men in Britain, Harris used to be massively idolised in the UK. He was held in such high regard, he even painted a portrait of the Queen for her 80th birthday. In 2023, Harris finally died due to natural causes at the age of 93. His final years were spent mostly at home, minimising public appearances as much as possible. Harris was debatably the most famous target of Operation U-Tree, which resulted in him being sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. All his honours were revoked, with all his TV appearances now mostly lost to history, something few are upset about.
But his fall from grace was quite something. It was very, very big news here in the UK.
Jimmy Savile.
How about looking at some charts just now?
Is there a British man more hated than Savile became after his death? Now it's harder to find someone who remembers how he was perceived before his death. For decades, he was one of the most prolific figures on the BBC, most famous for hosting Top of the Pops and Jim'll Fix It.
As soon as he knew that we needed him for Jim'll Fix It, here he came.
Now he's only seen on television when he's being demonised, and for good reason. Despite extensive charity work, behind the scenes, he was one of the most vile people the BBC ever employed. There were indeed allegations made during his lifetime, but they were all suppressed by the BBC and his closest circle. To lighten the mood, who do you think is the most heartwarming presenter on television? Let us know in the comments section.
Ooh, and it makes me wonder.